On the 20th of April, 1999, at 11 a.m., two students at Columbine High School, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, carried out one of the deadliest mass shootings in American history. And in under an hour, they committed what has often been referenced as the most infamous mass shooting, shocking the nation for decades as it gained a lot of media attention. But what led up to that day, and what happened in the aftermath? Well, in this video, I will be covering one of, if not, the deadliest shootings in American history, Columbine.
25 years ago, two students unleashed horror inside Columbine.
The Columbine
High School in Littleton, Colorado.
No, you goddamn piece of pumpkin shit! I'm gonna pull out a goddamn shotgun and blow your damn head off! Do you understand?
Eric Harris was born on the 9th of April, 1981, in the area of Wichita, Kansas. Eric was born into a rather small family, being the youngest in a family. His father, Wayne Harris, was in the U.S. Air Force and was described by multiple sources as being professional, disciplined, and structured. As a result of his time in the military, he brought his military mindset into the family home, being described as a strict father, having high expectations in relation to his children. Multiple accounts claimed that Eric Harris felt constrained in his family home due to the high expectations and rules. There have never been any reports of abuse within the home. Eric Harris's mother, Karen Harris, worked as a secretary and had been considered family-orientated. Accounts claim she was protective, nurturing, and emotionally expressive, having a somewhat close relationship with her sons. Eric Harris grew up in a structured environment, which likely contributed towards his desire for control, as well as internalizing his sense of frustration when he didn't feel powerful socially. Eric attended a variety of schools, due to his father being in the U.S. Air Force, meaning the family often had to move into different areas. Eric attended elementary school in Ohio, Kansas, and a few other states before his family eventually settled in Littleton, Colorado, where Eric attended Ken Carroll Middle School around the early 1990s, and it would be in this school that Eric befriended another boy his age. This boy was Dylan Klebold. The pair became friends instantly as they bonded over things like video games, computers, dark humor, and also their interest in guns, with both being seen shooting targets in old videos. Dylan Klebold was born on the 11th of September, 1981, in the area of Lakewood, Colorado. The family he was born into was described as upper middle class. His dad was an electrical engineer, whilst his mom was in education. Both parents were described as having a close relationship with their son Dylan. Throughout his upbringing, he was described as internalizing emotions, leading to him having traits of depression, which he tried his hardest to hide from his parents. Dylan Klebold attended Georgetown Elementary School towards the end of the 1980s and into the 90s. He was described by teachers as polite, quiet, and friendly. Around the early 1990s, he attended Ken Carroll Middle School, where he went on to meet Eric Harris. Both were described as feeling alienated by their peers. Multiple accounts claim that both teens were not really bullied, but instead teased by their peers, which is fairly common in school. Both teens, however, bonded over their ideas that they were alienated and/or pushed away from society. In 1996, both Eric and Dylan started their high school years, attending Columbine High School, a school based in Littleton, Colorado. It was during their first few years at high school that strange behaviors and potential warning signs began to show. During his first few years at Columbine, Eric Harris began to show signs of severe anger, hostility, and a lack of empathy. He frequently wrote about his hatred for others as well as society in his journal, writing on one page, "I hate the fucking world. Too much goddamn fuckers in it. Too many thoughts in different societies, all wrapped up together in this fucking place called America." He wrote this in 1998, just a year before the shooting took place. Parts of his journal have been released to the public since. Dylan Klebold also wrote in a journal and showed many of the same ideas as Eric within his writings, often talking about society as well as violence. In January 1998, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris broke into a locked van in the attempt at stealing computers and other equipment from inside. Minutes after this, a Jefferson County Sheriff's officer drove past the boys, who were sat in a parked car by a park entrance. Due to it being late at night and the park being closed, the officer began to investigate investigate. When the officer announced he was there, asking where the equipment was from, Eric Harris would respond admitting to stealing it from the van with Dylan. Both were later charged with mischief, breaking and entering, theft, and trespassing. During the case, they were offered to join a diversionary program in order to clean their criminal records. This meant they had to attend community service as well as going through psychiatric treatment. Eric Harris was ordered to attend anger management classes as a result of his severe anger issues. Both were later let off a few months later for being well behaved. Eric Harris wrote about this in his journal, writing, "Isn't America supposed to be the land of the free? How come if I'm free, I can't deprive some fucking dumb shit from his possessions if he leaves them sitting in the front seat of his fucking van in plain sight in the middle of fucking nowhere on a fry fucking day night? Natural selection. Fuckers should be shot." At the end of December 1998, an economics class was being held, and as a part of the class, both Dylan Klebold as well as Eric Harris were tasked with making an AD for a business. Both him and Klebold made a video called Hitmen for Hire.
No, you goddamn piece of ass shit! Do not mess with that friggin' kid! If you do, I'll rip off your goddamn head and shove it so far up your friggin' ass, you'll be coughing up dandruff for 4 frickin' months!
Go ahead.
Look, I don't care what you say. If you ever touch him again, I will freaking kill you. I'm gonna pull out a goddamn shotgun and blow your damn head off. Do you understand, you little worthless piece of crap?
The video depicts them as a part of the Trenchcoat Mafia, a clique from the school who were known to wear black trench coats, something they later did during their attack. They would extort money in order to protect people from bullies. It was rumored that both Eric and Dylan were a part of this, however, it was later debunked, as it's known that they were friends with a few members of this clique. During creative writing tasks, both Dylan and Eric showed a desire for violence, with one teacher writing on Eric's work saying, "Yours is a unique approach, and your writing works in a gruesome way. Good details and mood setting." Around this time, both Dylan and Eric began to really look into different firearms, previously showing an interest, but not to this extent at this time. In 1998, both were under the age of 18, meaning they couldn't legally purchase firearms. They had previously attained a few firearms in 1997 and used them at shooting ranges, but it was later in 1998 when Eric began to write about making bombs in his journal, documenting his excitement about making bombs, as well as the power over others he gains from having access to them, as well as writing about large-scale destruction. He started stockpiling guns as well as ammunition. They had also started accessing secluded areas where they tested bombs. It was clear both Eric and Dylan were planning something, however, it wasn't known what it was yet. In March 1999, 6 weeks before the Columbine Massacre, Dylan and Eric traveled to a forested area in the foothills southwest of Denver, Colorado. The pair had an array of ammunition as well as different firearms, some in fact would later use within the shooting. Amongst them were a sawn-off shotgun and a semi-automatic pistol. They recorded a brief video showing them shooting at trees as well as bowling pins. Within the video, both Eric and Dylan can be heard having a conversation about what it would be like to shoot someone in the head. The pair were with 2 other teens who were arrested later on for providing both Dylan and Eric with firearms. This video was a part of a collection of videos found by police, often referred to as the basement tapes. A collection of videos recorded by both Dylan and Eric. A few warning signs should have been taken seriously by the police, with it being revealed that a few students had reported Eric's website where he spoke publicly to the police, but to no avail. Some of the things he wrote included, "One day, I'm going to make them all pay. Everyone who ever laughed at me or annoyed me, they'll see." This showed a desire for revenge. He also posted claiming that he would bomb people and murder innocent people, claiming to want to kill the entire state of Colorado. This was reported to police, however, it's unknown and thought that they didn't take any action against Eric Harris. Dylan's journal, on the other hand, was less about violence and showed that his motivation behind the attack was completely different to Eric's. In both March and April of 1999, the pair began to intensify their planning as to when they would arrive at school, where they would store their weapons, and how they could potentially potentially delay police arrival with the use of their explosives. Both Dylan and Eric began to discuss April the 20th as the day they carry out their plan, attending school normally whilst they plan the horrifying act. 2 to 3 weeks before the shooting, both Eric and Dylan scouted entrances in school and planned the attack out. They practiced with their weapons outside of school. Both Eric and Dylan continued to write in their journals, showing a different motive entirely. Eric wanted to make a name for himself and kill everyone, writing, "I'm going to destroy them all and make a name for myself," whilst Dylan wanted to die, which was later backed up in more of his journal entries. In the week before the attack, between the 13th and 19th of April 1999, both Eric and Dylan were noticed to withdraw socially, spending more time together planning their attack. Journal entries in basement tapes, which were later recovered by the police, indicated toward them mentally preparing for the attack. Friends of both Eric and Dylan noticed they had been surprisingly secretive and had hinted toward an attack, which occurred just 7 days later on the 20th of April 1999. In Eric's journal, he spoke very openly about the shooting, writing, "Once I finally start my killing, keep this in mind, there are probably about 100 people max in the school alone who I don't want to die. The rest must fucking die. If I didn't like you, or if you pissed me off and lived through my attacks, consider yourself one lucky goddamn N-word. Pity that a lot of the dead will be a waste in some ways, like dead hot chicks who are still bitches. They could have been good fucks. Oh well, too fucking bad. Life isn't fair. Not by a long fucking shot. When I'm at the wheel, too. God, I want to torch and level everything in this whole fucking area, but bombs of that size are hard to make. And plus, I would need a fucking fully loaded A-10 to get every store on Wadsworth and all the buildings downtown. Imagine that, you fuckers. Picture half of Denver on fire, just from me and vodka. Napalm on sides of skyscrapers and car garages blowing up from exploded gas tanks. Oh man, that would be beautiful." Eric took around a 5-month break from writing in his journal, until just days before the shooting, in which he wrote one of his final entries.
"Months have passed. It's the first Friday night in the final month. Much shit has happened. Vodka has a Tech 9. We test fired all of our babies. We have 6 time clocks ready, 39 crickets, 24 pipe bombs, and the napalm is under construction. Right now I'm trying to get fucked and trying to finish off these time bombs. NBK came quick. Why the fuck can't I get any? I mean, I'm nice and considerate and all that shit, but no. I think I tried too hard, but I kinda need to, considering NBK is closing in. The amount of dramatic irony and foreshadowing is fucking amazing. Everything I see and hear I incorporate into NBK somehow. Either bombs, clocks, guns, napalm, killing people, any and everything finds some tie to it. Feels like a goddamn movie sometimes. I want to try to put some mines and trip bombs around this town too, maybe. Get a few extra frags 25 on the scoreboard. I hate you people for leaving me out of so many fun things. And no, don't fucking say, well, that's your fault, because it isn't.
You people had my phone number and I asked and all, but no. No. Don't let the weird looking Eric kid come along. Ooh, fucking no.
25 years ago, 2 students unleashed horror inside Columbine.
The
Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado.
On the morning of Tuesday the 20th of April 1999, both Dylan and Eric made sure to wake up before their schedule. They made their way toward each other in order to group with one another before the planned attack had taken place. The two gathered their firearms, as well as a few explosives, and set out to school. When arriving at Columbine, both Eric and Dylan placed duffel bags containing the explosives in the school's cafeteria at around 11:15 a.m., the busiest lunch hour in the school. A rumor that they placed these duffel bags prior to the shooting is also known. However, I can't confirm if this is accurate. 2 backpacks containing explosives had been placed in a field around 3 miles from the school. This was believed to be a tactic in order to draw firefighters and police away from the school. While Dylan and Eric carried out the attack, only a few of these bombs detonated, however. Both Dylan and Eric then changed clothes, changing into trench coats before arriving at the school's parking lot at around 10:50 a.m. As Eric Harris pulled into the parking lot, he saw his classmate Brooks Brown, who he had recently become friends with again after multiple disputes. When Brooks noticed Eric, he began to tell him about a test he had missed earlier on in the day. Eric responded by saying that won't matter anymore, and go home. Brooks, who was already planning on skipping his next lesson, walked away toward the exit of the high school. This was when both Eric and Dylan arming themselves with a shotgun, amongst a few other guns like a Tech 9. When the pair attempted to detonate the explosives within the cafeteria, they failed, meaning potentially hundreds of students were saved, as it's believed if they did in fact explode, more than 300 students could have been killed. This is when, at 11:19 a.m., both Eric and Dylan started their rampage. At 11:19 a.m., 17-year-old Rachel Scott and her friend, both who were students of Columbine High School, would be sat on the grass eating lunch by the west entrance of the school. Both were shot by Dylan and Eric, and originally had thought it was a senior prank. Rachel Scott would die on the scene from her injuries, whilst her friend was left paralyzed from the waist down. Dylan Klebold then started shooting his Tech-9 towards students. However, it jammed, forcing him to stop shooting in order to fix the gun, fixing it by reloading the gun. As this was happening, Eric Harris saw 3 students and aimed his carbine down at them whilst he stood in the staircase of the west entrance. He shot 10 times, killing 15-year-old Daniel Rohrbaugh and hitting 2 students next to him. The 2 students were injured and did not die. A teacher and coach that worked at Columbine would hear the gunfire and screaming from the cafeteria, and it would be at this point that he would start to warn students in the cafeteria, advising them to hide under tables and in closets. Eric Harris then turned west and saw 5 students sitting on a grassy hillside. He shot at them 7 times in total, hitting one of them in the face, leg, and arm, and another in the chest, arms, and legs. This student fell to the floor and played dead. The other 3 students survived without any injuries. At this point, the pair entered into the building through the west entrance. Dylan Klebold then retrieved his shotgun and started firing down the stairways, injuring Nicholas Foss with a graze wound from the shotgun bullet. Dylan then walked the stairs toward the cafeteria, coming across an already injured student, Lance Kirkland, who was crawling on the floor begging for help. Dylan then said, "Sure, I will help you," before shooting him in the jaw. Despite already being injured, Lance Kirkland actually went on to survive. Dylan continued toward the cafeteria, stepping over an injured student playing dead, even saying "sorry, dude," before he entered the cafeteria. Whilst Dylan was briefly in the cafeteria, Eric continued to shoot innocent students, wounding a 17-year-old girl who was left partially paralyzed after the shooting. Dylan then exited the cafeteria and met back up with Eric, who was shooting from the stairways. They then started throwing pipe bombs. Whilst this was going on, an art teacher, Patty Nelson, and her student, Brian Anderson, had heard all of the noise and thought this was an extreme senior prank. Both walked toward the west entrance, which by this point was exactly where the shooters were. They were both injured by the shooters, but survived. At 11:22 a.m., 3 minutes after the shooting started, police would receive the first call in relation to the shooting, after an officer assigned to the school noticed a dead student near the parking lot. Eric, who was at the west entrance, began firing shots towards a resource officer assigned to Columbine called Neil Gardner. Neil began to fire back. During this shootout, no one was hit. Eric and Dylan then carried on into the school. Whilst Neil Gardner called for backup, both Dylan and Eric continued to shoot at any students they saw, shooting a girl in the ankle. However, she managed to walk out of the school. 2 deputies rushed to the school, and similarly to before, a shootout between Eric and the deputies began outside the side doors. However, no one was hit, and Eric eventually continued on into the school. Whilst they were in the school, they shot a teacher, a William David Sanderson, who was hit in the back and neck. Sadly, he died after the shooting from blood loss whilst he waited for medical help. At 11:29 a.m., 10 minutes after the pair began the attack, they entered the library where 52 students were hiding, as well as 2 teachers and 2 librarians. Eric fired his shotgun twice toward a desk within the library. Both Dylan and Eric then shot disabled student 16-year-old Kyle Velasquez in the head and back with a shotgun, killing him on the scene. They spent around 7 minutes within the library shooting at every student they could, killing 10 students. These included 16-year-old Kyle Velasquez, 14-year-old Stephen Earl Kerno, 17-year-old Cassie Renee Bernal, 18-year-old Isaiah Joel Schulz, 16-year-old Matthew Ryan Kechter, 18-year-old Lauren Townsend, 16-year-old John Tomlin, 16-year-old Kellyanne Fleming, 15-year-old Daniel Mauser, and 17-year-old Corey DePorter. Rest in peace. My thoughts and prayers are with the friends and families of everyone mentioned. At around 11:36 a.m., both Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris left the library, moving toward a science room where they then caused a fire, which was extinguished by a teacher in a room adjacent. They then walked back toward the cafeteria, where they were seen on CCTV. They spent 2 minutes in this room trying to detonate the explosives they had hidden prior to the attack. Before leaving, after leaving the cafeteria, they returned to the north and south hallways, shooting into classrooms and throwing Molotov cocktails, going up the south hallway at 12 p.m., shooting at police through windows as they made their way towards the library. And at 12:05 p.m., all gunfire had stopped, with both Eric and Dylan killing themselves. Eric would shoot himself with a shotgun, and Dylan would shoot himself with a Tech-9. In 2023, Anne-Marie Hochhalter would die from her wounds sustained during the Columbine Massacre. Rest in peace. By 12 p.m., SWAT teams were deployed and stationed around Columbine, With ambulances rushing to help transport wounded students and teachers to hospital, by 4 p.m., Sheriff John P. Stone made an estimate of 25 dead students and 50 wounded, referring to the massacre as a suicide mission. On the morning of the 21st of April 1999, bomb squads were sent into Columbine in order to find any explosives, discovering the explosives held within the cafeteria on the 22nd of April 1999. In the aftermath of Columbine, dozens of lawsuits were filed against families of the perpetrators, the sheriff's department, and certain gun manufacturers. However, they were unsuccessful. Columbine resulted in a change in policing as well as school safety, with schools increasing security measures as well as lockdown drills. Columbine didn't just change one school or one community, it changed everything that came after it. For some people, it became a warning. For others, it became something dangerous to copy. Over time, its name kept showing up in the backgrounds of later attacks, not because it explained them, but because it had been turned into a symbol. The media played a big role in that. Early coverage rushed to find motives, created myths that stuck, and gave the shooters more attention than they ever deserved. Even years later, those stories still shape how these events are talked about. Columbine taught us that how we tell these stories matters because the wrong focus can cause real harm. What's left now isn't just history, but a responsibility to remember the victims, to stop repeating the same narratives, and to understand that these events don't happen in isolation. Columbine didn't end in 1999. Its impact is still unfolding, and what we choose to learn from it matters.